Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 legislative update for Decatur County. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dawn Lowe. I'm the Executive Director for the Greensburg-Decatur County Chamber of Commerce. And it is our pleasure to welcome you to Greensburg City Hall. Thank you to Mayor Joshua Marsh and Communications Director Kristen Williams for allowing us to utilize this beautiful space and helping us with the setup for today. At this time, I would like everyone to please rise as Greensburg's 2022 Miss Tree City, Taylor Smith, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Taylor. I would also like to thank Leah Kane, Marketing Administrator for the Greensburg-Decatur County Chamber of Commerce, standing in the back for helping us get prepared for today. Any marketing that you see coming from the Chamber is coming from Leah's desk, and she does a phenomenal job, so thank you to Leah. Today's event is being live streamed on WTRE's YouTube channel, so thank you for being here, and I know that we have WRBI in the room as well. Thank you. Coffee today was from The Branch, a local business here in downtown Greensburg, and our donuts today were from Cornerstone Bakery and compliments of the Apostolic Church, so thank you to both of those entities. Today is a unique day, and we want to thank our elected officials for being here with us. This opportunity doesn't come along very often, and there are a lot of decisions that are being made on our behalf. So it is our privilege and honor to have four of our elected officials, Senator Jean Leising, Representative Randy Frye, Representative Jennifer Meltzer, and Representative Lindsay Patterson here with us today. Thank you for being here and being available to the citizens of Decatur County. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the morning. Ms. Jennifer Sturgis is an attorney with Rolfus, Garvey, Walker, and Robbins, where she practices criminal law, elder law, and juvenile law. One little fun fact about Jennifer, she was the executive director for the Greensburg-Decatur County Chamber of Commerce from 2003 to 2010. So thank you, Jennifer, for helping set the foundation for the Chamber. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm going to briefly introduce our esteemed guests here today. I want to lay a few ground rules. We will be giving each of our representatives 10 minutes to give a brief introduction of themselves and any bills of note that they would like to talk about. Then we will open up to the floor for questions. If you would like to ask a question, we ask that you stand at the podium that you just saw Dawn speaking from. You will be given 2 minutes to ask, 2 minutes to ask your question and also try to get the question answered briefly so that we have enough time to give everybody a chance to ask any questions that they have. We do ask that you limit it to one question. If you have more than one question, after you've asked your one question, you can get back in line, but please go ahead and get back in line. Don't ask more than one question at a time. Also, please remember this is a public forum. We would like to maintain decorum and respect, and we ask that you ask a question. This is not a time for public debate, and if you have any more detailed questions that can't be discussed in that small amount of time, each of our representatives and our senator do have their own offices, and you can contact their office to set up time to meet with them or talk to them in more detail, in more depth. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest today. To my immediate left is Senator Jean Leising from District 42. She's been serving on the Indiana State Senate. Her first time was from 96 to 1998, and then she has now been serving since her re-election in 2008. She is the chair of the Agricultural Committee, is a ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee, and also serves on the committees of Commerce and Technology, Education and Career Development, Health and Provider Services and Utilities. Senator Leising serves Decatur, Fayette, Ripley, and Rush counties, and portions of Franklin, Jennings, and Shelby counties. Please welcome Senator Leising. Next, we have Representative Randy Frye. He is serving Indiana House District 67, which includes Ohio and Switzerland counties, as well as portions of Decatur, Jennings, Jefferson, and Ripley counties. Representative Frye is a retired firefighter of 26 years and was elected to the House in 2010. He serves as chairman on the Veterans Affairs and Public Safety Committee and also sits on the committees for Roads and Transportation and Utilities, Energy, and Telecommunications. Next to Randy, we have Representative Jennifer Meltzer. She is one of our freshman representatives. She's the new House District 73. I believe that is our newest district, which includes portions of Bartholomew, Decatur, Jennings, and Shelby counties. She was just elected last year in 22 and currently sits on the committees of Education, Judiciary, Local Government and Courts, and Criminal Code, one of my favorites. She is an attorney representing the city of Shelbyville and previously served as Deputy Attorney General with the Indiana Attorney General's Office and worked for the Indiana Department of Health. And then, last but not least, we have Representative Lindsay Patterson, who serves House District 55, and she's also a freshman to the legislature. Her district includes Fayette, Union, and Franklin counties, as well as portions of Decatur, Ripley, and Resch. She was elected in 2022 and sits on the committees for Environmental Affairs, Family and Children, and Human Affairs, and Roads and Transportation. She is a dental hygienist in Greendale, so welcome. And so we'll start, each of you will have 10 minutes, and we'll start with Senator Leising.
Well, thank you for having this opportunity today for us to catch you guys up with what's going on at the legislature. We started on January the 9th, and the session this year will run through the end of April. And this is the budget year, therefore it's considered the long session. Now that budget, you know, the governor presents his budget, he gets it to the House. The House is who's been working on the budget now, and then it will come over to the Senate, where Senate folks on appropriations will get their stab at making changes. So if anybody has any specific budget requests, and I know everybody needs more money for whatever it is, just let us know today. But that won't be finally decided upon probably until the very last day or two of session. So that gives you kind of an idea. What's going on now is I was just in a panel in Shelbyville yesterday, and there are lots of new representatives and new senators. But for instance, Jennifer Meltzer and I had met each other, but one of the representatives over there, Representative Green, I didn't meet until yesterday, and he'd say, well, haven't you been in session since January 9th? Well, it's almost like there's a magic wall in the middle of the State House. So that first half of the session, we really don't see the other side often, unless it's at an event in the evening, a reception or something like that. So anyway, but now things will start changing because the bills that started in the Senate, and those are bills that'll have a number ranging from 1 to 500. And bills starting in the House start at 1,001 and go upward. Those bills will have to pass the Senate by, I believe it's the 28th of February to move on to the House, and they'll move from the House over to the Senate. The bills have started there. And then it's kind of the same process. And I go over that because I think people think, well, why don't you know something more about that House bill? I haven't even heard about it yet at this point, probably. So anyway, I think it's important for you guys to know. And of course, then if it makes it through that second House, it'll go to the governor, and you guys all know the governor can either sign it into law, become law without his signature, or he can veto it. So, but if there's differences after that second House, it goes to something called a conference committee. And a conference committee is where 2 senators and 2 representatives are appointed by their leadership, 1 from each party, and they have to work out the differences. And sometimes those differences don't get worked out, and the bill has gotten that far and still dies. So that kind of gives you a quick wrap on the process. I have this little handout and those of you that didn't get one, there's some back on the back table. But, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the bills that I've been directly involved in, but I would tell you on this little handout there's an important one that there's going to be a commission set up on tax reform, and that's like a 2-year commission. And specifically, right now, it refers to property taxes and income taxes. But know that I think if they get serious about talking about those, they're going to be talking about all taxes, because they're still going to have a revenue stream for state and locals. So, you know, kind of hang on, see what's going to happen with that. Then there's also, they keep referring in the Senate to this tax cut for small businesses. Those are small corporations, actually, that when they submit their federal tax statement, if this bill passes, they'll be able to have a deduction for what they paid to the state. And so it will help with federal tax obligations. So we'll see if that bill keeps moving. Probably a bill that some of you even here may have talked about or been concerned about is Senate Bill 4, which is what I call the County Health Department bill. And each county will be able to decide, if this bill passes, whether or not they want to opt in to a new proposal that would give the State Department of Health guidelines for county health departments, but along with that, there would be a financial reward. But your county council and county commissioners would both have to approve. And so I think there will be counties, because of past COVID frustration, that won't opt into it. But this bill really is not about COVID. It's really about the poor health statistics for Indiana. Indiana is not doing well in whatever health category we look at right now. And so the state realizes that we need to step up to the plate somehow. We're spending a lot less money on local community health services than all other states, really. We're real low in that regard. So I'm sure somebody will have questions about that, but it is totally an opt-in, and my guess is there will be counties that say no, even though there would be a substantial monetary reward, I guess you would say, for those that participate. Senate Bill 1 has to do with the great need for mental health services. There are currently only 24 community mental health centers within our 92 counties. And so this bill passed unanimously, literally this week, out of the Senate, and to try to approach and address the issue of mental health. And I would tell all of you and remind all of you that years ago when I worked as a nurse, mental health did not include addiction. Now it includes addiction and addiction services. So the mental health demand and pot, so to speak, is far expanded from what it used to be. And so we again, our statistics are not good. Our suicide rates are up, our drug overdose rates are up. And so we've got to at least try to figure out what can be done to help people that need services. One of the things that I've worked hard on this session is trying to advance kids beyond high school, whether that be for a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a certificate that's going to allow them a better income after high school. And so there are 2 bills specifically that I'm going to tell you that I've authored that address this issue. One has to do with completion of the FAFSA, F-A-F-S-A, which unfortunately in Indiana, we have one of the lowest completion rates of the FAFSA document by high school seniors and their parents. And as a result of that, last year alone in Indiana, $65 million was left on the table that was designated for Indiana. And nobody stepped up to the plate and applied. Now, granted, for Pell Grants, that money, there is an income level, but in addition to that, I'm going to tell you that a lot of scholarship money now is tied to completion of the FAFSA. So, I mean, my oldest granddaughter, I told my daughter, I said, oh, don't even bother, you guys both work, you probably won't be eligible for anything. But the truth is, as a result of that, she was able to get a Purdue Foundation grant or scholarship because she was a good student. She also got a National 4-H scholarship. So I'm telling you, if you got kids or grandkids, you need to encourage them to complete the FAFSA, their parents to do so. And if the bill moves, we're going to try to make it more of a mandated thing with an opt-out, because some people are not going to want to do it. So that's all there's to it. So anyway, but hopefully we'll see some action, because our completion rate is so low and our college enrollment is far lower than it's been. I believe it was down to 53% now. So again, not a good statistic. I don't mean to talk about gloom and doom here this morning, but I think that everybody needs to know, even though we do a lot better than a lot of our neighboring states and different things, we do have some things to still work on. The 21st Century Scholar Program is the other program that would help kids beyond high school, and that's something that they sign up for as 7th and 8th graders along with their parents. And if they keep their grades good, I think it's above only 2.5, I believe, average, then they also stay out of trouble. They can qualify for state tuition for our colleges. So really encourage the people in your families to participate in these programs. I also had an education bill quickly that all these standardized tests we require at the state level, it's all your tax dollars paying for them. Well, guess what? The summaries for those that parents and teachers receive aren't easy to read. So guess what happens? If you give me something that's very difficult to read, we're busy, right? You're busy, I'm busy, it's not gonna happen. And so I have a bill that just says that when the state of Indiana enters into a contract for any required testing, that the company that's providing the testing has to provide an easy-to-read summary that will be helpful to the parent and to the teachers to at a glance say, Susie needs help in math, Johnny's a rock star in math, but needs help in literature, reading, or whatever. So anyway, so I'm hoping that that bill moves. The last thing I want to just mention to you, and there are so many things, but I'm on the Utilities Committee, and I think it's important for all of you to know that on the current path that we're on, your utility bills will increase, okay? So if you think they're high now, they're going to get worse, all right? And so you go, well, why would that be? Well, there's a lot of pressure to go green, to go less carbon, right? And even though some people would say, well, but wind and solar, isn't that free? Well, transmission isn't free, and wind and solar are not dependable, reliable sources. So MISO, the Mid-Intercontinent Distributor of our utilities, they're concerned about the future stability of the grid, okay, as we transform or transfer into more green energy. And so right now, on an average day, and you can get the MISO app on your phone, and I won't bore you with the details, but about 30% most days of our energy right now still comes from coal, about 30% from natural gas, about 15% from nuclear. None of that is actually currently generated in Indiana, but MISO takes in a 15-state area and a province in Canada. And then usually wind is providing somewhere between 7 and 15%, and solar most days less than 1% when you look at that whole area. So I do think it's something that we need to be concerned about. There's a big push for electric cars, including our Honda here is definitely moving in that direction. And as those electric cars all need to be plugged in, there is going to be basically even greater demand on the grid, and the grid is just hardly making it now. So anyway, just things for you to think about and things that you might want to ask questions about. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Senator Leising, and thank you for mentioning Senate Bill 1. Here in southeastern Indiana, we are in a mental health crisis, no doubt. We have such a lack of service providers. So I hope that the legislature, especially as it passes in the House, that they're going to take a good look at how we can solve that problem. So I'll turn it now over to Randy Frye.
Good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. The House also has House Bill 1006, which is dealing with mental health as well. Representative Greg Sturwall is the author of that bill. He has pretty much the guru in the House when it comes to some of our legal bills. He and I worked on a bill back in 2019 that created the jail overcrowding task force. We asked the question, why are our jails overcrowded? And everyone had an answer, but no one had any data. And so we began to dig into it, and over the next year, the task force took hearings around the state, came up with a report. It's still available online if you want to look it up. I think it's a pretty good document. And basically, it said that, part of what we already knew, but it said that our county jails are our mental health facilities. Obviously, that doesn't get it, that doesn't work. There's folks that are there, need mental health treatment, and they're not going to get it. They'll be discharged, and they'll be back into the system shortly, and we don't want that. So we're going to continue to work with the Senate and look forward to that. The Senate bill coming over, I hope the Senate will look forward to our bill coming over there, and then together maybe we can begin to really take a serious look at mental health and mental health issues, including drug addiction in our local communities. Last year, I authored a bill that allowed level 6 felons to go to the Department of Corrections, not because I wanted to see them leave the community, but because I wanted to see them get mental health treatment immediately. And the Department of Corrections told us that they could do that. Also decreased your jail population. So it's all a part of a bigger plan that we've been working on for a number of years to try to get there, to try to help, at least help with this crisis. And I agree it's a crisis in our local communities. Just one small correction. I only represent a portion of Decatur, Jefferson, Jennings, and Ripley. And the redistricting, which took effect in November, I no longer have Ohio, Switzerland, and part of Dearborn, but I miss it. I love those folks down there. I would love to have kept it, but most of the time when it comes to redistricting, as Senator Leising knows, we have little to say about it. We can say yes or no, but that's about it. And but I'm very, very happy to continue serving the area that I have. It's the most beautiful part of the state of Indiana. So I also wanted to comment not only about Senator Leising and working with her for a number of years. We've done some really good work together and continue to do it. But I think this year, it's a crop of freshman legislators are brand new, the ones that were just elected this year. I told the speaker this last week that this is the finest crop of freshmen that I've been around in my time in the General Assembly, both Senate and House. They're deluxe, and two of them sitting to the left of me, Lindsay Patterson and Jennifer Meltzer, are as good as I've been around. So we're very fortunate to have folks like these two ladies on my left to work with going forward as we move through this legislative session. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that I work on. I am the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Public Safety Committee. That keeps me busy. I'm on the Energy Committee, which keeps me busy, and I'm on Transportation Committee, which keeps me busy. So all of those are very big time-consuming committees, but the Veterans Affairs Public Safety Committee is one I'll share a little bit with you right now. I authored House Bill 1034. Most of the House of Representatives is co-author. The authors where the bill originates, co-authors are people who agree with it and sign on to the bill. Most of the time, there can only be 3 co-authors and an author. This bill was opened up by the speaker, and I think just about everybody in the House signed on to it. What it does is it eliminates the Indiana income tax for active duty military. We've learned over the years, I filed this bill like 3 years in a row, and I finally got it a hearing, and it passed the House unanimously, by the way. Passed Ways and Means unanimously, passed my committee unanimously. It's over in the Senate now, where we hope it'll continue its process. But we found that these soldiers, when they enlist, they'll tell you they're from Indiana, that's where they're from. But as soon as they get around their buddies will tell them, hey, tell them you're from Tennessee, tell them you're from Florida. You don't have an income tax there. And they do. And we lose them off the citizenship rolls instead of losing the tax. So we want them back whenever they complete their military service. We want them to come back to Indiana. Some of the finest citizens we have are our former soldiers and sailors. And it's also levels the playing field, in my opinion. The National Guard, the Reserve, and the retired military all are tax exempt in Indiana. So this active duty is not. I don't think it's fair. The fiscal audit is, I think it's about $24 million after it's fully implemented after the 4th year, but I don't believe it's accurate. The fiscal is based on how many people join the military and how much pay they get, and then how much of that would be taxed. But that doesn't have any consideration for the people who simply say we don't live in Indiana anymore. And if you talk to a soldier, they'll tell you that happens all the time. So that's a bill that I'm passionate about and want to see that go. We talked a little bit about the budget. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. It came out yesterday. We got a lot of data we're going through. The budget's a huge document, and so it's going to take a little while to get through it. But in the budget, there's some money that may be of interest to you, and it's for the Meltzer Fire Service. There's $10 million in the budget for air packs and fire gear. Big expense the volunteer fire departments are their fire gear and their air packs. Each have to be replaced fairly often. Fire gear should be replaced every year or two. And so we're working on that. It's $10 million. That will be through Homeland Security. A department can apply to Homeland Security for the grant. So many sets a year, so many air packs. Homeland Security will be buying those. They can buy in volume, get a lot better price. And so that'll be coming out hopefully in this budget. The governor put it in there, we kept it in there, and I anticipate the Senate will as well. And then there's $13 million in there for firefighter training. Back in 2016, I authored a bill that created the Indiana State Fire Academy, and then Governor Pence was someone, I was very pro that bill. He signed it at the Fire Department Instructors Conference, and we were all excited. He went off to be vice president, and that bill didn't get funded. And so now in this budget, there's $13 million to fund it. It's based on a hub and spoke concept where the hub would be in Plainfield next to the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And the spokes would reach out to various regional fire training facilities around the state. The goal is to have one within 40 miles of any fire department in Indiana. And you would get certain specialized training in Indianapolis. You'll get regional training at the regional fire academies, and then a lot of your training will take place in your own fire stations. So I patterned this again after a hub and spoke concept, and it is now funded in this budget. So I look forward to that. A lot of the local fire departments, our volunteer fire departments, they struggle to get training. They got to travel a long way, or maybe it's not available, and it's punitive. We are losing our volunteer fire service, and if we do, we will not be able to put it back in place, and we can't afford to lose it. It's the biggest bargain in Indiana. I'm not positive of the numbers, but the Indiana Volunteer Fire Service Association says it saves Indiana $4 billion a year. I don't know if that's true, but even if 1/4 of it's true, we can't afford it. And so I'm actively working to try to help the Volunteer Fire Service. By the way, there is money in the budget that continues the Indiana Volunteer Firefighter Scholarship. If you're a volunteer firefighter in the state of Indiana, you can go to Ivy Tech free of charge, including books for anything but aviation. So if you want to be an RN, you want to go to Ivy Tech and get your RN, you don't want to have any student loan, just sign up for the local volunteer fire department, get down there and serve, and you go to school free. Another thing we're working on, which is still a ways off, is how to fund the volunteer fire departments. We're looking at additional funding for them. That's something that's, again, down the road a little bit, and we'll continue to work on that. As I said, the budget came out yesterday. It's my first look at it. Senator Leising is right. We often don't see bills, not because we don't want to, but simply being in the General Assembly is a little bit like standing in the middle of I-465. You're required to count every car and not get hit. And that's what bills are like that come at you. And there's so many of them, you really are familiar with the ones that you're impacted by. Later on, when they come to the House floor, you become more familiar with them. When a bill comes to my committee from the Senate, I'll get familiar with it. And so that's sort of the process. You just don't have the ability to be up to date on every bill. But the budget is an amazing document, the best budget I've ever seen. I'm looking at one of the statements in the budget. It invests almost $2 billion in K-12 education for the next biennium. It's most ever. I thought 1.1 billion, what I heard in the fall, looks like $2 billion. Amazing investment in our public schools and our schools. So something that I'm really proud of. So with that, I will take a drink of water and turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Representative Frye. So now I'll turn it over to Representative Meltzer.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here on this side of the table this year. Last year I was out in the audience with a lot of you, so happy to sit up here, looking forward to answering your questions. I represent a portion of Decatur County. It includes Adams, Clay, Washington, Jackson, and Sand Creek townships. One point of correction, and this happened yesterday too, but I am not on the education committee, so I'll talk to my communications person for why that happened, because I know it's not your fault. I am on courts and criminal code, judiciary, and local government. If that sounds exactly where you put an attorney, you're correct. That's where you drop an attorney. Courts and criminal code is exactly what it sounds like. We hear everything from courts that want an additional magistrate to their procedures. We'll hear any constitutional amendments for the most part. Sometimes they'll go to judiciary. Judiciary is mostly your civil code, everything from probate to DCS and some of your state agency types of laws. And then local government's exactly what it sounds like. We've heard township bills, we've heard residential tax increment finance bills, multiple different things that have to do with local government. I'm going to piggyback off of what Randy said about 1006. I have had the pleasure of working with both Greg Sturwald and Chris Jeter on this bill, who are my fellow practicing attorneys on the Republican side of the House of Representatives. A lot of people think there are a lot of attorneys in the State House. You just think there's probably 30 people in the House and 10, 15, 20 in the Senate, and that is not the case. There are 7 attorneys in the House of Representatives. There are 3 practicing on the Republican side, and there are 3 practicing on the Democrat side, and Representative Speedy is a Republican and does not practice law. So there only being 7 of us, I have things flying at me from all directions. It's interesting, sometimes I think I'm giving more legal advice to my colleagues than I am being a policy type person. Quite frankly, I'm very comfortable in that role, so it's kind of been fun. 1006 is a great bill. It addresses the need for individuals to not be sitting in our jails and for them to be placed in the mental health treatment facilities that they need to be placed in. It cleans up our current code. If you were to go across the state and ask our hospitals, our mental health providers, and our judges exactly how the current code, which is in 2 different chapters, works for someone to be placed on a 72-hour hold, you will get 92 different answers. There are 92 counties, and every single one is doing it differently, and you might even get more than that depending upon the judge you talk to. It's desperately needed to be clarified and cleaned up, and that is exactly what 1006 does. I'm also excited to be co-authoring House Bill 1194, which is authored by Wendy McNamara. And this looks at the other side of our mental health and what is happening in our court system. It has to do with competency. So for someone to be able to stand trial, they first have to be deemed competent. And so the first question that our judges have when someone is placed in front of them on charges is whether or not they are competent to actually work with their public defender or their defense counsel to properly represent themselves, and whether or not they really understood what they were doing at the time of the crime. Currently, we have individuals that are sitting in Decatur County jails, Shelby County jails for 6 months, waiting for a doctor to determine whether or not they're competent. First off, that's not fair to them. If they're not competent, they shouldn't be sitting in jail. Secondly, if they're not competent, they need to be receiving treatment. They do not need to be sitting in jail. And thirdly, it's not fair to our sheriffs that are having to run those jails and deal with individuals that are not getting the proper care and treatment that they deserve, because our sheriffs are then having to deal with them, and they're not trained to do that. They're not mental health providers. Neither are our judges, our public defenders, or our prosecutors. As an attorney, I'll be the first one to tell you that I am not a mental health provider. I cannot tell you whether or not someone is competent, and I don't want to make that decision. I will mess it up. And that's not fair to that individual, and it's not fair to the court system. So the goal of 1194 is to reduce that 6-month time period by allowing other practitioners to make that determination, specifically advanced practice nurses. They are advanced practice nurses that are going to be certified through the DMHA, which is the Department of the Family Social Services Administration. So they are specifically certified to be able to do this. So the concern that we're not having psychologists do this is removed. They're specifically trained to make a competency determination, which will then allow individuals to be moved out of our jails and put into mental health provider and treatment areas where they belong. Additionally, along the mental health lines, and this is completely outside the legislature, but I do want to make everyone aware that last year when the legislature changed it so that 50% of your opioid funds from your multi-district litigation went to local governments, which I personally believe is where it belongs. The other 50% went to FSSA. FSSA has now made the, in my opinion, great decision to do grants where they're going to match 1-to-1 every single dollar that local government then uses in accordance with those settlement documents. And those grants are due by February 28th from local governments. So as I look out at the mayor and some of our county officials, I would encourage you to look into that. It's a great way to take those opioid funds and double what you can do with them. Randy mentioned the budget. Not only does it address firefighters and education, it is going, currently, if the Senate agrees, is funding ready. And I know here in Decatur County, READY has been a great opportunity to partner with Batesville and Shelby County. And I think you guys have actually broken ground on a park, if I am correct. So I know that refunding a READY 2.0 is an opportunity for further partnerships between local governments, the state, and private to invest in our communities. So I'm excited to see that READY is being funded. We're also putting significant dollars towards women and families. We understand with Senate Bill 1 being passed last summer and limiting abortions, we're going to have more babies in the state of Indiana, which is great, but we also then need to support those women and families, and so we're putting money towards that. Putting money towards economic development, mental health, and public health. There is funding for SB4, which Jean briefly went over. I know there's concerns about SB4, but Jean is right. Our public health numbers are abysmal. We are, with all due respect to everyone sitting out here, we have very high infant mortality rates. We have very high poor maternal health rates. Our obesity rates are very poor. Our mental health and addiction rates are very high, and our overdose deaths have gone up in the last year. We desperately need to be focused on mental health, addiction, and public health so that we can be healthier. If we don't get healthier, we will be taking all the money that we're seeing going in and quite frankly, most likely paying it towards Medicaid, which I don't think is where we want to be taking all of our tax dollars. And additionally, there are 3 constitutional amendments on the horizon. The first one has to do with removing the commissioner of the DOE from the succession line for the governor. So if the governor were to no longer be our governor because of death or illness, it would then go to lieutenant governor, and there's a succession line just like there is for president. Since the DOE is no longer an elected official, it's not appropriate for that individual to be in the succession line, so that person's being removed. The second one is actually on its first reading this year, so constitutional amendments have to go through 2 separately elected general assemblies, and then they go to the public. So the first one with regards to succession is on its second elected general assembly. The next 2 is on their first. The first one has to do with judges being elected from outside their town or city. We shockingly have a shortage of lawyers. I didn't think I would ever say that when I graduated, but we're having difficulty finding lawyers to be judges in our small town and city courts, and those town and city courts really do a big push across the state of a lot of our smaller level crimes. And if we put those on our county courts, you're going to end up needing more magistrates, so no matter what, you need more judges. This allows those individuals to potentially live just outside the town lines and come in and be that judge. And then the third one is coming over from the Senate and has to do with who's able to receive bail and making it clear that if someone's a risk to the public, they're not able to receive bail. So those are some of the big things that are happening in the legislature, and I'm excited to answer your questions.
Thank you, Representative Meltzer. And last again, but not least, Representative Patterson.
Hi, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and coming out and listening to us. So I have in Decatur County, I have Saltville, Clinton, and Fugate townships. I wanted to tell a little funny story. I was raised by a Southern man, and so he would have these little funny sayings like duck on a June bug, she held in there like carrot and biscuit. So when I came to the State House, everyone was saying, you know, how do you feel yet? Do you feel like you're drinking from a water hose or a fire hose yet? And I did not understand that, and now I am figuring it all out. As a freshman, just bear with me. I'm figuring everything out. I'm probably not going to be as well-spoken as them. But I am on roads and transportation, so I want to talk just a little bit about one of the bills that I authored. which deals with low water crossings. So I'm sure that if you're from around this area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've had several deaths in Franklin County. We actually have 26 in our county, so we have the most. I live in Brookville. So something that we authored was for warning signs so that those deaths don't happen. So that's something that's really important to me. I have 15 and 16-year-old boys. I live on Yellow Bank, and we have 2 on our road. So it's something that I think needs to be fixed. I authored the bill. It hasn't been heard in committee yet, so and it won't this time around. We're getting too close to the deadline, but hopefully soon I can get that moving and get that heard. I'm also co-authoring 1127, which is authored by Representative Cash, and that is removal from COVID-19 immunization requirements. I am co-authoring 1164, which is with Representative Judy, and it also deals with restrictions from immunization requirements. And I'm also co-authoring a parental rights bill. So that is just making sure that up until the day that you move out of your parents' house, or until you're 18 or decide to emancipate from your parents, that they have their rights to raise you however they choose to raise you. I wanted to talk just a little bit also about the mental health. Yesterday I went to a 4th grade class and we talked about government. And so I asked them at the end if they had any questions, and it was heartbreaking because most of them raised their hands and they wanted to talk about drugs. And so they asked me what we're doing to make sure that people are educated and that they understand how bad drugs are for you. Of course, that was in a 4th grade tone, but it was very sad because they all had stories about uncles that had passed away from drug addiction and dads that were on drugs. So I think it's very important, and I'm excited that our House, I know our Speaker of the House, he has indicated that it's very important to him for mental health, that we get that under control. So I'm thankful that our government, or our governor, and that our Speaker is really wanting to make that a priority this year.
Thank you. So now we will open up the floor for questions. Again, if you'll head over to the podium, there is a microphone over there for you to ask your questions.
Hi, good morning. I'm Vicki Wilson, and I just feel blessed to be calling myself, saying that I live here in this tremendous tree city, Greensburg, Indiana. I'm a transplant from Cincinnati, and you don't realize when you're in the city how your sewers work, your drainage systems, and when you said you're dealing with low water spots, I live out at Lake Santee, and I welcome all of you to come out there and speak with us. Infrastructure needs to be addressed out there. We have fields where the runoff rolls in off the farms, and it comes down onto lots. And you will see soaking water for a week or two that it hasn't rained, because the creek coming in to those fields can't get into the lake because all the drain plates that the farmers are putting in their farm fields are working, and they're really getting that water off and down to the basin of the creek. And I live right next door to it. And we have infrastructure problems coming in because of the rate that the water comes in now. We have molds, spores, our trees, the roots of them are so small because of the water damage being soaked in. So I please welcome all of you to come down and speak with us. And I really do want to speak on mental health, because also with the infrastructure of the waterways, I have a conservation club, LLL, Love Lake Land, or Live, Love, Laugh. However you want to take it. And life's too short And I applaud the mental health here. I am a survivor of suicide. I have to get up here and speak it. And I ask you in the audience, do not be afraid of it. Do not run from it. Do not hide from it. You will never find a solution. We are all here because we care and we need solutions. Be that person who says, you know what? Let's talk. Let's check this out. And with exercise and obesity, and especially where I live, I want to find a way to put in the old ball field that isn't there and a walking track. Because I know when my endorphins go off, and I've taken care of Alzheimer's patients, and when I get them in the water or get them outside in the pool, and just their ability to be able to have the sun and the air, and like when we were talking about the soldiers funding and the mental health funds on that, it's so important for people to realize all our moms, our dads, everybody that's been in the military. And if you ever need any help, Randy Frye, Leslie Thackeray knows me. I was her Veterans Day girl for years, going around to the city, dressing up the windows. If any of you own businesses, you remember my face probably, because I am so just proud to be a part of this little town, and I thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't think I have a question.
Since we are in a budget session, is there any actual monies that, I think you've talked about the opioid funds, but other ways that we can actually attract mental health providers to our area? I think that's a big problem. We have a lack of service providers. I think you could, change get them evaluated for competency faster, but if we have nowhere for them to actually be treated, I think we're going to continue to have a problem.
Well,
Thoughts on that?
the Senate Bill 1 that passed unanimously, I mean, one of the things is there's going to be more money put in the whole mental health system. Last year, the 988 National Suicide and Crisis Line went live, giving all Americans a place to call when they need mental health support. But I think that the important thing is to bring it down to the more local level. And my concern last year was when I realized that there were only 24 community mental health centers in the entire state. We have 92 counties. So, we definitely are going to see a big push for this, because it's rare, Randy, when nobody speaks against a bill. I mean, even the best laid plan, but on the Senate Bill 1, 100% support. So I think you're going to see a lot of activity, and hopefully communities will welcome what comes out of the final product.
Thank you. Another question?
Sorry. We've also seen several House bills that are trying to increase the reciprocity of people that have training out of state to be able to bring their training here to Indiana. One that I specifically remember, and I'm forgetting the number of the bill, but it allows military spouses that have training in a specific field to then come practice that training here. So our nurses and doctors that are married to a spouse, because our military tend to get moved around the country, it's allowing them to then come, and it also then expanded that to the National Guard. So that is definitely a step in the right direction, so that our individuals that already have those trainings and experience can come here and practice in that field here without having to jump through quite as many hoops. Additionally, we saw a bill that was trying to expand our boards and commissions that approve other people to come. So if you have, let's say you're coming from Ohio and you're a nurse practitioner, you've got to go in front of the nurses board to then be able to get certified here. We're opening that up for those boards to meet virtually so that they can meet more often and have those individuals approved more quickly. I think I heard someone waited almost 6 to 9 months to get that hearing, and that, one, they need that income for their family, but two, we need them here practicing. So the House is looking at those types of options as well.
That's wonderful to hear, because it is definitely a problem. So turn it over to our questioner.
My name is Alan Campbell, and I'm a fire inspector here in town and a volunteer firefighter out in county. And something I've seen a lot about is EMS at a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
I know Randy knows about that being on the public safety side of it, and I've been out of it since 2016. I now have a son that's in it, both as a regular paid firefighter and as a volunteer firefighter. And there's so many job openings for medics and EMTs in this state. I was a medic for 10 years. I practiced for 25 total. And the mental health part of it is finally what drove me out of it. Low pay, working all the time, family problems because you were gone all the time. I basically missed both my boys growing up. Is there any plan to kind of help that, to try to make EMS better, you know, and support it so we don't have such a bad, I guess, reputation? Because we are kind of, when I was in it, we were kind of the bottom of the list. You had police and fire, and then you had EMS. And that's really, I see that now, and I see a lot of my friends struggling through it, and I see a lot of my friends get out of it just because it's such a low pay, high stress job, and I see it as a breaking point along with all my friends, that it's going to collapse, and then you're going to be left without ambulance services or without timely ambulance services.
Absolutely.
Just two things I would tell you. I realized in my 7-county Senate district, there are some areas that really have a problem providing ambulance service, period, okay? And so I started looking into, was the major problem the lack of actual ambulance units or the lack of trained EMTs and paramedics? Well, I found out that under an existing program that is way underutilized, it's under the Department of Workforce Development. I think they did a terrible job of rolling it out. Sorry if I'm offending anybody here. But there is a program called the Workforce Ready Grant. And that particular program, if you have anybody that's interested in being trained as an EMT, they could go through that program without any out-of-the-pocket cost for the training, okay? And get the necessary equipment. So then I said, okay, so if we have that, you know, what about the equipment need? And I found out that ambulance costs are so high, and even if, in talking to some folks about this, even if you just want to put your old existing box, they call it, on a new chassis, new truck part, you know, you're looking at over $100,000. So I had a bill that actually passed out of the Senate, out of the Health Committee in the Senate, 12-0, that said that there'd be set up a grant program through EMS that you could apply for up to $50,000 for the purchase of an ambulance if you would match it with at least 50, and that would apply to communities under 35,000, not-for-profits, counties, whatever. And so that bill then was reassigned to appropriations because it has money in it. And Senator Mishler, our appropriations chairman, this week put the majority of that bill in the Senate Bill 4, okay, which is that community health, county health bill, because he says he thinks that makes that bill stronger because he recognizes the need for ambulance, EMT, EMS. So I hope we're going to see continued discussion as that bill moves forward and goes over to the House. And I don't know what we can do about the paramedic part, and maybe Randy knows.
Yeah, we're working on it and well aware of it. One of the things that we passed out of the House this year, coming over to Senator Sandlin, is I have a bill that did away with the residency requirement for public safety. I did away with it in 2021 down in communities 7,500 or less. The small communities at that time still wanted the residency requirement, so this year we just did away with it completely. If you're familiar with Batesville, your neighbor, Batesville couldn't hire out of Oldenburg. That's 3 miles. Oldenburg couldn't hire town marshal out of Batesville. It's 3 miles. It's crazy. I've never And I served 26 years as a career firefighter, and I've never agreed that my employer should be able to tell me where I can live. He can tell me where I can be on the day I'm supposed to be there and what time to be there, and if I'm not, I'm in big trouble. But I never felt like he should be able to tell me where I can live. And so we've done away with it, but we've done away with it for the right reason, and that is so you expand where you can draw from. The other thing we found out, Ivy Tech does a lot of paramedic training. Paramedic is 2 years of college. I was a paramedic for years, and it's not easy. Maybe it was easy for some, it wasn't easy for me. But we found out that Ivy Tech makes you take your first year of college before you start paramedic training. Paramedic's not a college degree. You can get one, but it's not required. You get a certification from the state to be a paramedic. You can get a national certification to be nationally certified, but you don't have to have a college degree. So what we've asked Ivy Tech to do, and I think they've agreed to it, is flip it. Do the paramedic training first, and if you want to go on and get your college degree the second year, you can, but after your first year, you're ready to go to the street. That'll really help. We found out that a lot of people who were going into medic school got frustrated. They didn't want to get a college degree, they want to become paramedic, and they couldn't work the street until they finished that first year. So that was, to me, that's a huge flaw that was brought to me, and we've dealt with it. We got to get the pay up. We're working on legislation now. Chairman Thompson, new chairman of Ways and Means, is very receptive to funding public safety. I've worked with him as recently as I think Thursday or Wednesday, and when we worked on not only funding for EMS but also funding for volunteer fire service. So as I said earlier, if we lose a volunteer fire service, we're done. We cannot afford to lose it. It's the best bargain in Indiana, and I never have understood it. I guess I love my volunteer firefighters, don't get me wrong, but I never understood why we make them raise their own money. We don't do that for my law enforcement brothers whom we love. We don't do it for EMS, although they don't make a lot of money. We don't make them volunteer. Why do we do it for fire department? What's up with that? So I think we've got to really take a deep dive, look at how we fund public safety and figure it out. Right now, and Mayor Marshall standing there, I'm sure you know this, but Batesville will steal from Greensburg, and Greensburg will steal from Shelbyville because there's just not enough people, and you have to constantly fill your openings, and they just keep moving. You can't blame the employee. They're just increasing their pay wherever they go. It's just we got to solve the problem of not having enough workers.
Thank you. That was a great discussion, and thank you for having some really specific ways that we're addressing real needs. So, Mayor Marsh?
Well, good morning again, everyone. Thank you for being here. And Representative Frye, a great transition to my point. We are very appreciative, and I'm a firm believer in this idea that the best government is the one closest to people. And I get the great privilege to work for the citizens of Greensburg every day, and you all get to work for the districts and the whole state. So there's a lot of great conversations being had about READY, mental health, which I'm fully supportive of, the Governor's Health Commission's request for $250 million starting next year. And all of that has a component that ties into local governments, both county, and we've got a couple county council members here, and a couple city council members, and a couple candidates, and although as well, they have a local match component, right? READY has a 1-to-1. We have to put up half the money that READY provides. So fully supportive of READY 2.0. Would love to see what the restrictions on that are going to be before we just hand off $500 million. CCMG, Representative Frye has been a big champion of that for small counties. We have a 50-50 match, meaning we have to put up 50% of the money that we want. If we want $1 million, we've got to put up $1 million. We've got local project awards from the federal government that are 80-20. OCRA does 50-50. The Governor's Health Commission is actually a 70-30. All that to be said, local governments have to provide these funds to match state dollars. Again, 100% supportive of that. My question is, why is there kind of this continual attack or interest in reducing this House Bill 1499, which is a reduction in the property tax from a cap of 1% per the state constitution down? Because that money truly funds local government. Right. It doesn't have an effect on the state budget. So while I understand the state has these billions of dollars surplus, which I believe is being put to good use, all those projects we just mentioned, my concern is you want us to improve lives, you want us to make a better quality of place. We want that. I think all of us in this room probably want that. And so why this focus on something that doesn't reduce the state's income but does reduce local governments? And again, thank you for all the work you do.
Do you guys want to tell you what we do?
I'll just point blank tell you I don't support 1499.
It's headed to third reading.
I'm well aware. I'm a no on Mondays. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but I don't know that
I don't see the point in trying to address property tax bills, which we pay in arrears again. So what 1499 does, and it's changed, it's been amended more times than I can count, and quite frankly, keeping track of where it's at when it's not in my committee is somewhat difficult. It's also a high level of tax math, so maybe Mayor Marsh can do that better than I can, but I'm an attorney and math is not my strong suit. My understanding is that we are trying to address the fact that property tax bills that are going to come out here in 2 months are going to be up by about 15%. That is a huge hit to every single one of you in this room. I fully respect that. I fully understand that looking at my own tax bill, I'm probably going to cringe. That being said, the reason your tax bill is up is because of assessed values being up. Your assessed value is up because home prices went up significantly in 2021 and 2022. So you pay your tax bills in arrears. I'm sure you guys all know this. You get an assessment in 22, you then pay that bill in 23. What the legislature is currently trying to do is address the fact that your bills are going to be up in 23 and then try to get them back down in 24 and 25. The reason I am against this is because we're already seeing home prices drop, which means your assessed value should drop, which means your tax bill should go back down. The market and the way that the assessed values work should take care of this on its own. If it doesn't, then your local governments can take care of this by lowering their levies. They have every single right to lower their own taxes if they see that they're going to be collecting more than they need. Just like the state has the right to lower our taxes, and we have done so. We are lowering taxes this year. The legislature, thanks to Randy and Jean, lowered taxes last year as well. I am not for forcing on local governments basically unfunded mandates. It's the reason that I voted no for multiple, well, one other thing this year was 1167, I voted no. I will be a no to 1575 because I think it's an unfunded mandate on local governments. It is something I'm strongly against. So my answer to 1499 is I'm a no, and that is why. I'm happy to hear from my colleagues.
Thank you. I think we have a couple other people, so.
One final comment on that is, when we're talking about assessed values, when the state put in the constitutional property tax caps, I believe under the Daniels administration, the idea was that properties would be fairly assessed, fair market value assessments. And Indiana has constantly lagged behind on that. At a county level, county auditors or county assessors, have notoriously low valued homes. And so we're seeing kind of a perfect storm. The state is emphasizing and pressing for more accurate assessments. Those went up, property values went up. But I still believe it's a good deal to live in the state of Indiana. I still champion that. And we've launched a Make My Move program that brings people, we interview people from all over the country who are amazed by our cost of living. So for those that are concerned about increase in assessed values, we still have a great cost of living. And a 1% property tax on a residential property is a great deal. I would encourage you to talk to somebody from Ohio who has an entire slew of property taxes. Thank you again.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Micah Warren. I live here in Decatur County, Greensburg, and on East Base Road. My wife and I moved here approximately 12 years ago, helping Decatur County our home. We love it. We are both originally from Ripley County. I own and run Lorem Electrical here, so I wear two hats. So I'm going to piggyback on Inspector Campbell's EMS. I'm also an EMT in Ripley County. He's absolutely right. EMS in southeastern Indiana, probably the state as a whole, is going downhill. We've got many friends that have quit, many friends that just struggle. The pay is terrible. And I can tell you that most people in EMS don't do it for the money. They do it because they got to do the hard. There's only so much that I can take. I work a full shift every other week, and that's about all I can handle. So I encourage you, firefighters, police, EMS, we've got to do something with EMS in general. I believe it's not just a pay, but it's also a struggle for EMS as a whole, getting equipment. I believe here in Decatur County, I think 30% of the runs can't be billed. That's a huge chunk, and I believe that's about the same what it is for Ripley County as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that on the billing side, I think the legislature's got to have a responsibility of looking at improving Medicaid rates, Medicaid reimbursement. And there's a problem with that, only because it depends on the area, but in some locations, it's over 50% of the runs are Medicaid rates. Medicaid rates are for the lower income folks. And so the reality is the Medicaid budget keeps growing in total, all right? So it was in the last budget, I don't know about this one we're gonna work on now, in the last budget, 51% of the budget went to K-12 education, and 15% went to Medicaid, and only 12% to higher education. And my guess is that higher ed will have a hard time holding its own at 12. And so, because I think Medicaid is gonna keep pushing upwards. So, you know, I think that, but we're gonna have to address the issue because it has a rippling effect, not just on emergency services, but if you talk to our hospital providers, if you talk to, I don't know if there's anybody here from the hospital, but probably over half of your births here in Decatur County are likely Medicaid moms, which means the hospital is probably losing money on every birth that happens under Medicaid. And we just can't keep that up, or we're gonna not have hospitals that even wanna participate, okay? So, thank you for bringing it up, though.
One more quick comment about the renewable energy side real quick. That's my bread and butter. We brought solar energy to southeastern Indiana years ago. Solar does absolutely work, but your comment earlier that says it's not feasible, it's not feasible now because there's not enough people doing it. Technology changes it. The cell phone I bought yesterday is already outdated.
And what about the battery storage? I think that will make it feasible. Absolutely. If the battery storage can get beyond 4-hour capacity.
So one thing that you all need to do is get a state tax deduction for solar installations. That will help and go a long way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Holly Payton, and I am actually working with a group of teen girls from a neighboring county, and we are putting together a teen advocacy council. So one of the things, their project that they want to work on is mental health. So today I'm pleased to hear that that's pretty much everyone's focus is mental health. Along with mental health, though, everyone comes from different walks of life. We all know that. That's what makes the world go round. But people have different lifestyle decisions. And maybe the traditional lifestyle is a mother and a father at home. And this is, I mean, everyone has different lifestyles, like I said. So the censoring of, I count it just off the top of my head, there are 3 bills that are proposed to pull books from school libraries. So I don't really understand how that is going to benefit a student's mental health if they can't read about a lifestyle that they're seeing at their own house. Regardless if you believe in it or not, that may be true for that particular student. There are, I believe I wrote this down correctly, $2 billion, K through 12, is that what was said? For the fund, okay. So $2 billion for K through 12, but I don't understand why there are so many bills right now that is stating that certain books have to be pulled from the school library. Now, if there are things in these books that are not child appropriate, I understand that, but I have more faith in our school librarians to know that certain things shouldn't be in there, and I don't think that is the case. So my question is, who do you guys support the censoring of the school books in our local schools. Do you support the censoring of school books? Because like I said, there are 3 just at the top of my head that is proposed to do that.
There is a Senate bill that was heard in Judiciary Committee this week. I am not on that committee, so, and I understand it was amended dramatically, so I don't know what it actually entails now, but I know that people were concerned about age-appropriate material, okay? And what you're really talking about is the whole issue of sexual orientation. And so for those that aren't quite following the conversation, there's a lot of concern by parents of children who say, in our school library, should there be at the lower access at the lower age levels for books about that, you know, that maybe that's a more mature subject. I don't know what's in the bill now because it was drastically amended. I think there'll be lots more discussion about this issue, and know that it is parent driven, okay? So that's about all I can tell you. I don't know what's happened in the House.
I've vaguely heard about some bills, but again, am not on the education committee, and we've not heard them in judiciary. So if they're moving, I apologize, but I'm not aware of it.
One of the things I'll point out is there are lots of bills that are drafted that never get here. So I don't know, I have heard of, I mean, I've heard there's some bills filed, but I don't know if those bills are moving.
On the House side, there were 676 bills that were filed. 101 of those at this point have made it over to the Senate, and a vast majority of those have never even had a hearing. So as Jean explained when we started, you can file a bill, the chairman of the committee has to agree to hear it. So I was very fortunate, both of mine have been heard. One goes to thirds on Monday, the other one's already over in the Senate. But tons of bills don't get a hearing.
What are the bill numbers?
There is SB 12, HB 1130, and HB 1522.
And HB 12 is the one that was heard in judiciary and drastically amended, but I don't know what it says today.
1130's not received a hearing.
Okay, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Monday one of those are being heard, I believe.
Well, your question was whether we support it or
Right.
not, even if it hasn't been heard. This is where I stand on that. Once you're in high school, then I think the issue is when you're in elementary school, middle school, things like that. Because I know there are books out there that are not age appropriate. As a mom of high school boys, I've taught them what they should be and what they shouldn't be reading. I'm not saying they're always going to follow that. We hope so as parents. But I have always told my boys, and I live this myself, that if you want to say Happy Hanukkah, that's fine. Just let me say Merry Christmas. So I think when you're in the higher grades, then it's a little bit different. But when you're exposing young children to things, then I don't think that that's right, and I don't support that.
Was it Jennifer or Lindsay? Was it you that said you authored a bill?
1407.
Was that how parents about raising your children? Is that what it?
Yes. Yeah, it's a parental rights bill.
Okay, that's what it was, parental rights. So go along with that, then shouldn't, I mean, don't get me wrong, pornographic materials should not, and I do not believe they are in K through 12 here in Indiana that I'm aware of in any school libraries. So if a student wants to pick out a book, because say they have 2 moms at home, and they're in the 3rd grade, they want to pick out a book, it's not pornographic, but it has 2 moms, do you believe that should be up to the parents if the child should check that book out or not?
Absolutely, that is up to the discretion of the parents.
So that shouldn't be pulled from the library though, correct?
I feel like it should be pulled. I just feel like, because I think that when you're in school, you're there to be taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. I don't think there needs to be anything outside of that taught to children for any reason. I think that is up to the parents to teach that at home.
So a library should not have any books for reading for fun, they should just be reading, writing, and math? Is that what?
No, oh, certainly not. I just mean if there's an agenda behind it, I don't feel like it needs to be out there.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but we are over time on that question.
Hello, I'm Sabruff. I work for Decatur County REMC. The REMC recently completed a broadband feasibility study. I would just like your guys' input on what you're doing and what you feel the REMC and the community could do to better position ourselves to receive the upcoming grants with OKRA and BEAD. Those grants are critical in order to be able to provide broadband internet to the community.
There are massive amounts of money, both federal and state, to put broadband in. I'm glad to see Decatur County REMC is considering it. Southeast Indiana REMC is building it as fast as their little legs can carry them, and we desperately need it. My internet is unreliable at best, it's slow a lot, and so I know there will be a lot more money available. I haven't gotten a chance to go through every line of the budget, but I'm sure there's a lot of money in there, been grants in the past. I know Governor Holcomb supports it. So I would definitely hope that you guys would be on the front end of applying for the grants and building it as quickly as possible.
I would just add, there are no new broadband bills as such with language moving on the Senate side, because I just asked that question of our utilities chairman this week. We know that there is a big push for what's going to happen with satellite kind of internet versus fiber. And so I don't know if that's what's holding down additional bills in regard to broadband. I don't know. But there's a lot of existing money that can be applied for. And if it weren't for my Verizon cell, I have no internet service at my farm at all. That's it. So, you know, I can't pull down a big document from the Senate from my home. So, I know the need is there all over my district, lots of areas in my district. So,
I think it's important to note that so far, at least, fiber optic isn't going to become obsolete. We've yet to find a computer that can outrun it. So even with satellite's great, but weather can affect it.
right.
And fiber is, in my book, the best option. I installed a lot of it in my life, and I think it's a fantastic product. I hope you guys put it in, and I'll sign up right away.
Thank you all for some really great questions, and just would like to encourage all of you who are in the audience, if you do have things you're passionate about, all of our representatives and our senators are accessible. Hopefully, if you can get some access to the online, you can find their contacts to all their offices. And, you know, that's what they're here for. They want to hear what you guys are interested in and what's important to you. So please contact them. I know in the past I've never had problems getting responses. Sometimes it's not necessarily something that I want to hear, but I do know that they take the time to listen to me. I will say, I know there were some bills that I was personally grateful that didn't go forward, but I also recognize that I'm not the only one in the room, and so everybody, thank you for coming, and I appreciate the respect that you guys pay to each other today. Kudos again. We do live in a great community.
Yeah,
And we have one last question.
That's fine. I just have a comment too on the mental health end. I do know that our commissioners are working on helping the mental health provider here in the county, because I'm on the county council. I'm Danny Peters, and the money we've been spending on mental health, I feel like it's been wasted, so I'm not letting them get away from it at all. But I do have a question on, we went to an AIC conference last week, and I know property tax was a big issue up there, but also on personal property, they're talking about raising the threshold from $80,000 to $250,000. Is there any, are you going to pass that on to some other way of getting the money for the county
I
for us?
haven't heard anything about that.
All I've read's the footnotes. That's all I've seen.
Yeah, I haven't heard about it in the Senate. The only property tax bill that I have seen moved in the Senate has to do with establishing a 2-year commission that would review property taxes and income tax. And I'm assuming that the Senate will continue to push that approach before some of these other property tax bills move, but I don't know, it's too early to know.
Well, I understand the concept, make Indiana a little bit more small business friendly, but it does affect local government a whole lot. I just wondered if there was a way they're gonna pass it on somewhere else if they do put that through.
Well, they'll have to, won't they? I mean, that's why I think they are looking at a commission, because I think when you start substantially changing one form of revenue from another, it has a rippling effect. So I would hope that we wouldn't do anything drastic that's going to impact the various sectors. Okay.
Thank you. I'll call that as our last question because we only have about 5 minutes left, and I'll turn it back to Dawn for any announcements from the chamber.
We would just like to thank everyone for coming today. We do have Leaders and Loggers next Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. that will be held at the TAP. That is a networking event, and we will have Mayor Joshua Marsh with us. So we're going to go from one elected official group to another. So please feel free to join us. That is free and open to the public. Again, that's next Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. at the TAP in downtown Greensburg. I'd again like to thank Representatives Frye, Jennifer Meltzer, Lindsay Patterson, along with Senator Jean Leising, and our moderator Jennifer Sturgis for coming today. Thank you, Decatur County, for showing up. With that, have a great and safe weekend.